In the previous video, I explained that, as might be expected, the chart for Donald Trump Jr. is showing the stresses he's going to be under as a result of the lawsuit filed by Letitia James. And the same is true for this guy, the second offspring I'm covering here, Eric Trump, who you may know has been involved to the extent that he's already taken the Fifth Amendment many, many times, according to what I hear, 500 times during a deposition, in order to not incriminate himself, which I think is pretty funny since his father was so adamant in 2016 that those who take the Fifth must surely be criminals. We see that with his moon at 27 Aquarius, Saturn is roaming pretty close to those degrees already in the summer of 2022. But we know it will return to those degrees going into the January, February, March period of 23. So Saturn is definitely involved, as would be expected, as an accountability energy. But then we switch to Jupiter, which normally is a expanding, helpful energy, but not always in a square, and especially when you give it reason to express in this way, i.e. legal problems, which Eric, directly or indirectly, has manufactured. And so Jupiter in the legal house, the 9th in his chart, is squaring his Sun and his Mercury. You see it drawn here during the period of spring 22 to spring of 23. That is never going to work well. But more worrisome is when you notice that the Uranus transit is also locked in, because roaming through the 14th degree puts it at the zenith of the chart opposite Saturn, and that takes it into roughly the same period as well. You start to see this pattern where multiple planets are involved, and that's never good. But again, in the context of the situation that he finds himself in, because a different individual that hasn't committed, willful crimes will not necessarily manifest the situation in this way at all. And when we look further and notice that the Uranus now is at the zenith opposing Saturn, but it's making its way toward the later degrees when it's going to eventually square the moon. And if you then add that Saturn, once it gets out of Aquarius and therefore conjoining the moon, enters Pisces, enters the 8th sign, which is never a helpful sign, the 8th, if you are involved in this kind of action, and from where it makes squares to his Sagittarius planets, which is why this red line goes through here, because first it'll find the Venus, then the Uranus, and eventually the Jupiter, and that carries it all the way into 2025 in the spring. You notice that part of that brings the Uranus in. So you've got a double planet situation happening, and Saturn beyond 2025 will enter Aries, and Aries is not particularly friendly at all, because by the time it gets into Aries, then it starts to square his Capricorn planets, first Mercury and then the Sun. So on Saturn alone, we're headed into deep into 2026, 2027 even, because since the Sun is at 15 degrees, 2027 you'd still see this line. And you turn to the right here, what is Neptune doing? Neptune, from this year all the way to 2026 and beyond, is in square patterns, because where it is now and into 2026, it'll be squaring Jupiter, then squaring itself, and here at the bottom it's capturing the square to Mercury. Beyond that, it'll still square the Sun, although that'll take a little bit longer. It extends it into roughly the 2028 period. But certainly all the way to 27, this Neptune is a problem. Pluto, going back to 2021, has been squaring his Mars. Continues to square it now, squares it solidly through next year and into 24. You can see it here. 24 comes back into Capricorn, 2940 and so on. It looks like it's past the Mars, but I wouldn't count on it, because in transits you can easily get into 2 to 3 degrees beyond the degrees of the planet. So I'm being kind here by ending the yellow line at the end of 23. This could easily extend further. So bottom line, this guy has a lot to worry about. There's a ton of runway here for a ton of discomfort, and for this situation to unfold. We all know that legalities tend to go slow, and of course Trump family anything is to stall and delay, but there's simply too long a period here for this to pay off in any positive way. So I expect this guy to go down just as much as Junior and his father. Finally, this line here that I've drawn is the Mars making its station in early November, late October, in Gemini, opposing Jupiter, which is also unfriendly. Basically, all of it is difficult and reflects the situation he finds himself in. And another one on the list where I can say, couldn't happen to a nicer guy.